welcome to Celestial Bodies, a place to wonder in awe about the planets above. Today, let's wonder about the upcoming Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries. It's one of the most significant astrological events of the entire year. Saturn moved into Aries on Friday the 13th, last Friday. And it's its first return to this sign since 1996. So if you're old enough to remember what was unfolding in your life roughly between 1996 and 1999, it may be worth reflecting on that time now. Often these earlier chapters can offer clues or echoes of what a new cycle may ask of us. But the conjunction between Saturn and Neptune happens this Friday, Friday the 20th. And this conjunction is a little more rare. It's a meeting of two very different planetary forces, and it doesn't happen all that often. Every 36 years, Saturn and Neptune have a conjunction. And it has never really happened. It's very rare for it to happen at 0 degrees Aries on the Aries point. But there are some recognisable themes and archetypal themes that emerge when these planets come together. We rarely see the exact same events repeating, but we can notice a pattern, like an echo or a rhyme in the sort of emotional, cultural and psychological atmosphere of the time that can feel strangely familiar. I really enjoy the work of the astrologer Richard Tarnas and his book Cosmos and Psyche. In that book, he offers like a very deeply researched insight into historical correlations of slow-moving planets like these two are. In the book, he also reminds us that the fullness of an archetypal complex can never be completely reduced or simplified. But yet, observing past motifs, it can help us orient ourselves within the present. So I'm going to summarise a few things, a few themes directly inspired by his work. And if this kind of inquiry really lights you up, I literally cannot recommend his book enough. It's really, really interesting and historical. It's interesting if you're interested in history and how the astrology of that time repeats. So let us consider a few of these motifs. One thing that can happen during these Saturn-Neptune times is a heightened tension between ideals and hopes and beliefs, and between the hard realities of life, between faith and facts, sometimes between institutions such as the church and science, or any opposing groups who believe that the other is living in a state of illusion or deception. So these themes are heightened during such times. And motif 2 is there can be a widespread feeling of discontent, often accompanied by a kind of loss of faith, especially in social and political systems. So during the 1989 conjunction, which was the last one, there was collective disillusionment with communism spreading through Europe, culminating in the fall of the Berlin Wall. So structures that once appeared immovable or solid can end up dissolving with surprising speed. And a third motif that I picked out was an enduring sort of dichotomy between material reductionism with Saturn and imaginative vision with Neptune, between matter and spirit, between sort of what we call truth and what may later reveal itself to be illusion. So sometimes during these periods, the atmosphere itself can feel uncertain, even dreamlike, a little bit foggy, as though the ground beneath us is subtly shifting or is slightly hard to see. And I imagine many of you can already sense these themes moving through the collective field. It feels almost like a kind of psychological weather system that we're all swimming in at this moment. And how I feel this is showing up in the collective is sometimes in many ways quite startlingly obvious and clear. We're witnessing the exposure of hidden dealings, of civil and political unrest, like surfacing across many nations. Alongside this, there's this kind of like, I think, Hall of Mirrors quality, where the digital age has made us question what our eyes see, artificial images and manufactured narratives and scams everywhere. Like, we can't quite believe what our eyes look at or what our ears hear. That everything cannot be taken entirely at face value anymore. And at times it can feel as though reality itself has become a little negotiable. Is that the right word? Negotiable. And so we're being asked to cultivate a kind of deeper discernment, some stronger intuition, and perhaps with it happening at the Aries point, this red line feels very Aries to me, is a more embodied sense of who and what we trust. The astrologer Chris Brennan on the Astrologer podcast, he recently described this period as one of peak reality distortion. And I was like, yeah, that feels right on the money. And you can recognize like Neptune's signature in that phrase. But what I find almost quietly reassuring is that Saturn is here too. It's not usual that you may find Saturn reassuring, I suppose, but that Saturn's here, and that the conjunction happens at the very beginning of Neptune going into a new place. The conjunction happens right at the start of this, bringing in perhaps a bit of clarity. It feels like very much a dissolving and a beginning. And it feels like it's also the birth of something very new for all of us. Because although Saturn and Neptune conjunct every 36 years, this particular one in the Aries point feels in many ways something very rare and is still a mystery to us. And so we can look to the past for clues, but also every moment is like very unique. And so I feel like at this moment we're all kind of like the Fool card of the tarot, standing on the edge, sort of stepping towards the unknown with both innocence and that Aries courage, the courage to begin. And while Neptune might blur the edges of reality, this big circle feels like Neptune, Saturn is present here too, at the edge of the solar system, firming the ground or drawing the boundary and asking for a little more realism. So let this realism arrive as clarity, not cynicism, as steadiness instead of fear. And let us move forward maybe with structures strong enough to support what is true. So even as some illusions dissolve, perhaps something sturdier is trying to emerge. And perhaps after the conjunction, so the conjunction happens on Friday, and then slowly Saturn will move away from Neptune, and perhaps that might start to be a feeling of fog clearing. I like Saturn moving on and building something that's been born from the imagination. And while this story kind of unfolds on the world stage, I think it's also equally alive within our personal lives. Because during sweeping historical moments, which it really feels like we're within one, individuals were always living sort of more intimate Saturn Neptune stories with quiet endings, spiritual openings, and surrendered identities, and those new callings again emerging from the fog. And that is what I want to focus on for the rest of this video. Because now these two ancient planets, they're entering a new area of your birth chart. They're entering a new temple, a new house. And perhaps it's not about being too prescriptive in how, or even knowing yet what this is going to bring. So rather maybe than trying to control these planets or define them too quickly or turn them into something neat and predictable, maybe this moment asks for something else. Perhaps it asks us to allow, to listen, and to welcome in these new house guests. We have Neptune blurring the boundaries of perhaps who we thought we are, opening up our imagination. And then we have Saturn, Father Time, wanting structure, wanting us to devote and dedicate and work hard. So if you know me, you know I love the work of Ian McGilchrist, and there's something he once said that's always stayed with me. It was something along the lines of like, we do not, or we should not grasp the world, that we should open ourselves up to it so that something may presence itself towards us. So let these planets presence themselves towards you, being open to their wisdom. So just before we move into the rising signs, I want to invite you into your imagination and picture these two gods approaching the doorway of a new chamber in your life. Saturn, steady and weathered and carrying the gravity of time, wanting your devotion, patience, honesty and integrity. And Neptune, oceanic, luminous, dissolving the edges of certainty, perhaps even opening your imagination. And let's think of questions that they might ask. Questions like, where have the structures of my life become outgrown or illusioned, and what's ready to be made more honest? What dream is asking not only to inspire me, but to be given form, patience, and devotion? And can I learn to stand on ground that is both sturdy and sacred, allowing reality and mystery to belong to one another, to conjunct in a sense, to come together? What follows for each rising sign is not meant to be, it's a little predictive, but not prescriptive. Think of it more as invitations, as jumping off points for your own wanderings, and for Saturn and Neptune to begin to presence themselves into your life. We'll begin with Aries Rising. For each rising sign, I have an object or an image. For Aries Risings, Saturn and Neptune move into your first house. The first house is the house of the self, the body, the identity, the way you step forward in life, the most you place of the chart. And the image that came to me was of someone standing at the edge of a lake. They're going to dive in, but the water is cold. So there's a pause before entry. It's a kind of charged moment where instinct and awareness meet, and you understand that there isn't any way to know the water without jumping into it. But as you look down, you catch your reflection in the water. It's the ancient mirror, the first mirror humanity perhaps ever knew, staring into the water. But the reflection doesn't have like a perfect sort of sharpness. It shimmers a little. It moves. The edges blur. And maybe the question here isn't who am I, but who am I becoming as the outline begins to shift. And Saturn is standing with you on this threshold, asking for courage, but not the loud kind, but it's kind of quiet. The courage of sort of self-possession. Maybe the willingness to inhabit your life a little more deliberately and stand in your own authority. And Neptune might be softening the fixed image of who you thought you were, old identities dissolving, roles, performances, or even the way in which you introduce yourself into the world, shifting, changing now. It doesn't mean not to disappear, not dissolving to disappear, but so you can see yourself a little more stripped back, more you. This transit feels like it might allow you to stand more strongly in your own authority, more clearly, more surely. And at some point, you're going to have to choose to enter that water, to dive in. It also has a feeling of the Fool card with this one too. Moving on to Taurus Risings. And for Taurus Risings, the object here is some salt. But the image for Taurus Risings, this transit is moving into your 12th house. The house of solitude. The quiet, mysterious house. It's almost like the quietest chamber of the chart is the 12th house. And so the image I had for Taurus Risings was of a flotation tank. A flotation tank is a place of intentional solitude where you're alone yet deeply held, floating effortlessly in salt water, supported without striving. There's nothing to perform here and nothing to rush towards. In this space, the usual boundaries soften time even loosens its grip a little here. Thoughts slow down enough so you can hear something deeper. And many places, many people, they leave a flotation tank with realizations, with inspiration, and also that feeling that they perhaps don't need to hold themselves together quite so tightly. You do have to surrender, and this is a moksha house, a house of surrender. I think Saturn here is asking for devotion to your inner life and a commitment to rest and reflection and some of the unseen work of the psyche. And Neptune's inviting in sort of dream and even prayer, devotional practices. For Taurus risings, this growth may not feel quite so visible, but it might be about trusting what unfolds when you stop bracing, when you allow yourself to be carried or held by something larger. There may be endings here, like quiet closures and a dissolving of old emotional residues or people or patterns and places that have maybe undermined you in some subtle ways. There may be a closing of that. And the strength that's born is subtler, and it's not born maybe from so much effort, but from a kind of really deep inner alignment. I don't think you need to understand everything that's happening beneath the surface. Allow yourself to float. Maybe try a flotation tank if you never have before. For Gemini risings, Saturn and Neptune come into your 11th house. So this is the house of friends, friendships, communities, shared vision, and a future that's sort of calling you forward, hopes and dreams. And so the image here was of a table surrounded by sort of kindred spirits. There's conversation here. There's ideas that spark and overlap. There's a braiding of your love for something perhaps, and with others, shared ideas. It feels like it's the beginning of something here, of joint effort, of a shared dream perhaps taking its first breath. And Saturn moving through this space might be asking, like, what visions are strong enough to build life around? What friendships can mature with time, and what futures are you ready to put some commitment into? Not just to discuss anymore, to actually like start building. And Neptune might dissolve a sense of separation here, and remind you that intelligence and ideas can be a communal endeavour. But I think discernment matters as well, and there might be a understanding that not all circles are for you. There may be a sense of groups that fall away during this point. For others, you may find it unusual, the groups even or friendships that you find yourself drawn to. You might be longing a kind of more meaningful community, the one that's inspirational and sort of responsible. There may be healing in the realizing that you don't have to imagine your future alone. So you want to, I think you should, there's a feeling of gathering ideas, weaving, binding them together, and letting yourself be surprised by the people who appear. That your future is there's going to be a lot of revolutionary ideas, I think, new ideas coming through you that you may want to join in with others to help create. For Cancer risings, Saturn and Neptune enters your 10th house. So for Cancer risings, this is the house of the career, the highest point in the chart. This is your vocation, how visible you are, and maybe the role that you're here to inhabit in the world. And so the image I got here was like someone's waking up from a dream, a kind of lucid dream, quite vivid. Perhaps there was even a clock in this dream. And the idea was that it's time. It's time to step forward. It's time to be seen, or it's time to inhabit your authority with a greater clarity. And so that's why I picked the card, the King of Cups, as the image. It's leadership shaped by emotional intelligence. It's maybe you stepping into authority, but not in a way that feels hardened, but it remains very responsive. The King of Cups is that, he's that guy of responsible, sort of heart-led embodiment of kind of having to take that responsibility. And Neptune coming through here, that's kind of blurring things a little, but maybe making you imagine something into life. I would say for Cancer risings, there could be moments of doubt and questions about readiness, but as you become more visible, like almost maybe finding that you have to work through critique, or your own fear of being misunderstood. But being ready is really a prerequisite of moving forward. And more often, it's revealed to you through the very act of stepping forward. So for Cancer risings, once that was maybe just once lived in the inner world, maybe seeking more embodiment. And you may be asked to take that dream and make it reality and work hard and go for it. For Leo risings, Saturn and Neptune move into the 9th house. So this conjunction moves through the house of higher meaning, belief systems, spiritual seeking, travel, pilgrimage, the kind of travel that changes you, changes your mind and your outlook. The image I have was a boat leaving the harbour, like one of those old-fashioned boats, and it's like in fog, it's really foggy. So at the moment, it may feel like there's no clear destination and no precise map. But what there is a compass, your own inner compass, and a deep kind of instinct that it's time to go. I don't think this is a holiday. It's more like a quest for Leo risings. And Saturn here is going to be maturing your worldview and asking you to examine maybe beliefs that once felt unquestionable. Neptune maybe dissolving rigid certainty and opening you to sort of mystical experience or experience that can only be lived. There's humility in this journey. There's a willingness to become maybe a student again, to learn. Teachers might appear, and landscapes may shift something inside you. I think for Leo risings, this is a pilgrimage towards a more spacious understanding of truth, of what you think is true. And I don't think you need to see the entire passage before you begin. Just trust the quiet knowing that saying go. I think there's something to be said about when we travel to a new place and the fact that we can almost become a new version of ourselves in that place, because some of the old belief systems they don't live, nobody knows us there. There's such an opportunity sometimes when we go to a new space where nobody knows us to be more free. And I think for Leo risings, there's something about it, it can be really tempting to stay where you are, where everything is certain. But by going into new territory or new waters, you're going to discover something about yourself. And for Virgo Rising, this moves into your 8th house. The 8th house of kind of deep bonds, shared resources, karmic contracts, and agreements. It's a very sort of give and take part of the chart. So the image that came to me for Virgo Risings was one of someone seated at a desk, carefully reviewing a contract, reading the fine print and kind of noticing what others might overlook and deciding, are they going to sign? The 8th house is rarely casual. It asks for trust and vulnerability and emotional honesty. And Saturn here brings a kind of gravity, brings a weight, encouraging kind of clear agreements and mature boundaries. And Neptune maybe softens defences, invites in compassion, but also asking you not to disappear into another out of maybe longing or obligation, to just notice its quality there too. You might find yourself entering arrangements that kind of ask something quite clear or real of you, with a partner or with a collaborator or in a business or institution. And so you might be pondering, what is being asked of me? What am I willing to share or to sign to? What am I ready to receive? There's perhaps a sense of like taking your time, that these contracts, these different contracts, are not always transactional. The give and takes, if you merge consciously, they're not always equal. There's some here, some there. There's just this entanglement of the give and take that you might be feeling more deeply into. And you're going to maybe allow intimacy to stand on really solid ground here, really firming up. Because of course you're a Virgo rising, so you will be checking and making sure that everything's working right, and then really making deliberate, solid choices. That's what I have for you, Virgo rising. For Libra risings, this conjunction moves into your 7th house of partnerships, where we meet ourselves through another. And the image here was really clear. It was 2 people standing before a doorway, keys in hand. A moment kind of suspended in time. Are they arriving at a new home together? Or have they just locked the door and they're closing a chapter? With Saturn and Neptune here, relationships are being asked to evolve, perhaps beyond illusion. Saturn in the 7th often clarifies commitment, and Neptune may dissolve projections or old relational roles. There may be a bit of tenderness here and even uncertainty. Moments where the future of a bond may not be immediately clear. And perhaps try not to rush that knowing. again, I feel the sense of things getting clearer over time, and especially as Saturn moves away from Neptune. But I really believe that relationships that endure do not remain unchanged. They're recalibrated, they're reimagined, and they're chosen again with a greater consciousness. So there may be a refining here and a kind of quiet honesty, really sorting out what you want, which bonds are built on something real, and which ones were maybe held together by fantasy or fear or even obligation. So honor the pause at the threshold, like that image of the two people, and know that some keys are meant to open new rooms, and other keys are just meant to be set down with gratitude. So for Scorpio Risings, this Saturn-Neptune conjunction moves into your 6th house, the house of work and health and daily rituals that sustain a life. This is the sort of chop wood, carry water house of the chart, where it's a house where we do things over and over again, in a sense. And so for Scorpio Risings, the image that I got, well, there were a few. One was of an apothecary or a herbalist's kitchen, all lots of bottles and tinctures and dried flowers hanging up, and lots of care and attention and measuring, and really like a naturopath, a natural doctor surgery. But one of the images was also a doctor surgery. Herbs and shelves with jars and remedies. And a funny, very literal manifestation of this was for I am a Scorpio Rising, and when Saturn went into Aries on Friday, I found myself in the doctor's surgery. And that was the image I had, and that is exactly what happened. And I thought, oh wow, how literal can we get here? But I think it's more the question that for all Scorpios, there is this sense of maybe taking your health and well-being and ritualistic practices more seriously. There's things to be measured out, and there's ways in which the old way of being, of maybe just getting away with it, and this is just a bit more personal to me, but just kind of getting away with feeling good and feeling healthy may not work anymore. There may be a little more effort involved, but it doesn't need to be dramatic. It doesn't need to be even scary, but it just means a little bit more, taking a little bit more responsibility in that place. Saturn's inviting in consistency, and Neptune's kind of going to infuse this space with maybe a sacredness to the action, preparing nourishing foods and moving your body with care and resting when you need, and becoming a bit more discerning of where your energy is given. Because I feel like with Saturn in the 6th, your vitality may ask for more support. Not because you're weak, but because there's a sensitivity now, and you may need to refine and listen to your body. And this can all become a kind of form of love. Take care of yourself, treating yourself with care, and asking how your routines can become small ceremonies that support your life and your vitality. If you feel like you're looking for transformation, it doesn't feel like it's going to be instantaneous, like within health or work or routines, but it's going to be kind of crafted slowly and lovingly and carefully with a steady, compassionate attention. For Sagittarius risings, this conjunction moves into your fifth house. The fifth house is the house of children, creativity, self-expression, joy, and life force that's longing to put itself into form. And the image that came to me was of an artist's workspace. If you can imagine, like they're in the process of creating something, and so they have a collage of images pinned to the wall, swaths of colour, half-formed ideas, scraps of information, all layered. And it's not perfectly organised, but it's really alive, and it's a room that feels where something is trying to come into being. For Sagittarius risings, I feel like this is a return to the imagination. And for some Sagittarius risings, I feel like the presence of Neptune here. Actually, Neptune can be like these are kind of like magic markers. Neptune here is kind of like reopening a channel to source energy. That like subtle but unmistakable feeling of being moved by something larger than yourself. That creativity is not something that you manufacture, but it's like a download. It comes, it's something moving through you. And so, yeah, I feel like for Sagittarius risings, that if you felt almost like a kind of, like you could describe it as like a writer's block or a sort of dryness or even just distance from your creative spark, that this transit may gently dissolve that barrier. But obviously Saturn is here too, and Saturn is reminding you that inspiration alone is not enough, that dreams ask for devotion, for discipline, and a willingness to return to your work even on the quiet days. There may be even moments in this cycle that ask for solitude, but as sacred space. The kind of space that a poet needs to create something beautiful. The kind of listening that allows something invisible to slowly take shape in the world. And for some Sagittarius risings, this image of the artist may actually extend quite literally to the realm of children and to children themselves. What we nurture and what we help grow. So it may initiate some Sagittarius risings into parenthood, or draw you into deeper, meaningful moments with children. Or you could just see that as deeper, for meaningful moments with joy, with childlike joy. But just like children or any creative process, it's also going to ask for presence, patience, and a kind of reshaping of your priorities. Because, to care for a child is its own creative act. It asks for imagination, endurance, and surrender, but also structure and love that shows up again and again. So for whatever it is, children or your own creative process, you're going to have to show up again and again, because Saturn's bringing the gravity of responsibility. Neptune's bringing back the imagination. And it's about perhaps becoming a vessel strong enough to hold what wants to be created, whether that's art or a new expression of your voice or a life that you're helping, that you're bringing into the world. I think it's getting serious about your joy, but joy might feel different now, maybe less impulsive, but more enduring and more steady. So let the imagination open up again and gather what inspires you and honour what moves through you, and then patiently and lovingly show up, give it structure, because your creativity is not just a fleeting mood now, it's something asking to become real. For Capricorn risings, this conjunction moves into your fourth house. That's the deepest, almost most intimate part of the chart of home, family, belonging, the kind of ground beneath your feet. So the image I seen here was of an architect redesigning a home in a rubber. So blueprints spread out across a table and the pencil and rubber there. So there's a crafting of new space, but there's also a bit of rubbing out of old. There's permission to revise, to redraw perhaps the foundation. And I also got the image of Neptune moving here like water over sandcastles, dissolving structures that once felt permanent, even just permanent in your mind as an idea. Your very idea of home may shift. And what's washed away is maybe creating a new space. It's like blinkers have been taken off of what you thought was possible. Space to imagine again, to choose more consciously, um, to to build something just more in alignment with you now. The redesign might also be quite literal, like a move, a renovation, but it could easily be happening within the psyche and and within the intimate parts of yourself. So Saturn here, again, always wanting to know what's your long-term dedication. And because this is the most private area of the chart, the sort of subterranean area, a lot of the work of this transit may unfold quite quietly, or even perhaps invisibly to others, or just it's just again just more tender and intimate here. So there may be connections to roots softening, old structures or inherited stories loosening. But there can also be emergence, something rising from a dissolved space, something kind of simpler. And there may be a willingness to work on new foundations. Saturn always likes you to put a bit of dedication in. So allow yourself to sort of draw with a pencil and use your rubber. You don't need to replicate the past. You're here to author a kind of foundation that reflects who you are now. Because the home, the sense of home that you create now may become a foundation for many years to come. For Aquarius risings, Saturn and Neptune move into the third house. This is the house of communication, siblings, neighbours, learning, information, sort of the intellect, how you communicate, how you see the world through the intellect and your ideas. And the image that came to me was a kind of room filled with books or podcasts playing in the background and notes pinned beside sort of sketches. Like there's something about reading here, thinking, questioning, and a sort of search. So I got the image of books, but in particular, then I remembered a line from a book that I'm reading just now. That actually, this book, I started reading this book just at the end of the year. And some of the theme of this book feels relevant to the conjunction itself, but also maybe particularly to Aquarius risings. And so there is a line in this book that we have Lyra, the protagonist of the book. We're talking about something she's lost. So they say, what has Lyra Silvertongue lost? And it's her imagination. I know that the enemies of imagination are gathering their forces to invade the desert of Karamakan, and I believe they think something in that desert nurtures the imagination and allows it to flourish. So they're going to destroy it, whatever and wherever they find it. I want to find Lyra's imagination and save it from them, and with its help and with her help, I want to defend the imagination and fight its enemies. What is imagination? I believe it's a way of seeing, to see as we do, not as worms do. And then, yes, my person Lyra Silvertongue saw that once. She saw everything and everyone in a light of gold. She saw correspondences and analogies and echoes and resemblances, so that nothing existed without 1,000 connections to the world. And I saw them with her. For her, the world was rich with meaning and alive with delight. Then little by little, this way of seeing left her. So I set off to find it and bring it back. This part of the book feels like an invitation for Aquarius risings. There's something about Saturn and Neptune coming into your third that feels like a kind of hero's journey of learning, not casual education, but meaningful discovery. And the major theme in this book it's called the Book of Dust, that Lyra is on a quest, not just for answers, but for something that has been lost, in this case, her imagination, her soul in a sense, or a deeper thread of meaning. And I think that's the energy for Aquarius risings right now, that it's not just a search for information, but also for a kind of meaningful imagination bearing understanding, the kind that reshapes your inner reality and your relationship to knowledge itself. So there may be a dissolving of old certainties, or even teachers or mentors or belief systems that once seemed dependable but no longer hold the same authority. And that is an invitation. You may find yourself disillusioned by authority figures right now, but imagination is being invited back in. Neptune, imagination invited back in, and Saturn might be asking you to take this search seriously and to dedicate time and effort to what genuinely inspires you, rather than skimming the surface of endless content. So this could show up as a new field of study that's really awakening your curiosity right now. A book that doesn't just entertain you, but transforms your way of seeing things. Or conversations that shift your inner compass at this time. I think you're maybe going to be rebuilding your relationship with how you think, listen, speak, communicate, educate. And I think the quest feels profound because it shapes the reality that you live inside day to day. The third house is a very kind of like day-to-day neighborhood house. And so it maybe shifts your day-to-day like way of being in the world. For Pisces Rising, the final one. Oh, I've been speaking for a long time now. So we're finally arrived at Pisces. And for Pisces risings, this conjunction moves through your second house. It's the realm of resources, of money, of how you resource yourself and how you materially sustain your life. And Aries rules this part of the chart. So taking action in your material world may not be unfamiliar territory. But and you may already carry that spark of the beginner, the courage to start new things, the instinct to move, and the impulse to initiate lots of new projects. That feels like a very Aries second house thing. And for you, beginning, I don't think is the problem. But maybe what is being reimagined now is your relationship to continuity. And so the image I got was of a net, of a fisherman tending to his net. So now maybe it's the willingness to stay with something long enough for it to nourish you in return. So that's why I've got this fisherman mending its nets. So it's not the fisherman out at sea in the drama of the catch, but on the shore, quietly repairing what will one day sustain him, not by not, patiently strengthening the places where something once slipped through. It's a little bit, it's like humble, repetitive work, but deeply meaningful at the same time. Because for that fisherman, a well-tended net's the difference between effort that feeds and effort that disappears with the tide. So Saturn here is kind of whispering, let's build slowly and surely. Let's do what it takes. And that there's perhaps a strange freedom within restriction. And Neptune, rather than dissolving your material, may be asking you to bring a greater consciousness to where your energy flows, to notice your subtle leaks to places where time, money, creativity or self-worth quietly drain away, to notice these drains, not with judgment, but with lots of compassion and awareness. And to maybe to notice that you can sustain yourself and make enough in the material world without it feeling unsacred. It's about creating some containers strong enough to hold your life now, less scattering and more sustaining. You might discover here that security is not something that you chase, but that you craft slowly through devotion. So mend the nets. So for all of us, Saturn and Neptune, they are making this long journey together. Saturn will be in Aries for about 2.5 years, Neptune for maybe 13, 14, a longer time. And so I don't think you're being asked to have everything figured out. It's not a time for rigid certainty, but for mature listening. A slow walk through one of the most initiating signs of the zodiac, the fastest signs. It's kind of like a Zen koan, that beginnings don't have to always be rushed, that you can let dissolve what needs to dissolve and give your devotion to what's forming. Aries is such an embodied sign, and so let your intuition and body guide you, and honour your efforts enough to make them durable. Because I think this transit invites you to know that inspiration deserves structure. And that when your energy is gathered, you can build something that is imaginative and soulful, and also sure. I hope you've enjoyed these rising signs and this deeper delve into Saturn and Neptune, and look forward to seeing you next time.